Welcome to Super Sexy Fireside Chats with Jeremiah and Lauren. Just kidding. This is the Beyond the Dojo podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Jeremiah.
And we are in front of our fake fireplace because it's cold outside. And this is Florida, so we don't have a real fireplace.
No.
I guess some people do, but anyhow.
Well, we're still broke, so we got a fake one.
We don't have a house that needs a fireplace.
Yeah, whatever, we're still broke.
Right, sure. So, let's see here. Recent happenings in the karate things. Is there anything recent that we've been doing? I guess just we opened back up the dojo this week because we just got back from Christmas break.
Yeah, we got to train with our Westman Dojo friends.
Oh yeah, we got to go down to Sarasota to train with Rick Houghton and our buddies from down there, which was the first time that we have done any
traveling at all that year, huh?
We haven't trained with anybody since we were at Florida Winter Keiko last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was different. But it was really nice. One person got promoted.
Yeah.
And super basic class, but he always brings some interesting creativity to the class, so that was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working on things and just being in the class with people.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, not teaching, just kind of standing there and let him lead the way. It's nice.
Yeah, it is really nice sometimes to like I don't know. It's funny because when you come up in the dojo, I felt like you always want to teach because you always want to share things, and then when you teach all the time, you're like, man, I really just want somebody else to teach so I can just train and not think for a class.
Yeah, well, yeah, somewhat.
Yeah. So it's nice sometimes to have that break.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully 2021, whatever years this is, will bring more of those opportunities, getting to maybe train with some more people here and there.
I don't think so.
Don't look so positive.
I don't think so. I think you're going to be stuck in the house for longer.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see. So what we're doing in today's podcast is something that we actually tried before, but didn't work out so well. Today we're going to go over actually some discussion points on a study that I found. So I downloaded a bunch of studies that have to do with karate stuff. I must say that when I was in college, the couple of times that I looked up studies on karate, I really couldn't find any. So I don't know if this is just because they have a better collection or if it's because there are more studies. This one's actually from 2020. So that's, obviously very recent. The study is called Lower Limb Maximal Power Predicts Punching Speed in Different Static and Dynamic Attacking Techniques in Karate. And it's by, I think the guy, his last name is Quinzi. It's an Italian group that put it together. But I'll link it in the show notes as far as what it is. So basically the aim of the study, they say it's to investigate the relationship between maximal lower limb power during the back squat and punch kinematics in technical action starting from either static or dynamic conditions. And the second aim is to establish whether this relationship can be consistently observed across different technical actions such as gyaku-zuki chudan and a combination of kizami-zuki and gyaku-zuki. So basically what they're saying is they want to use a standardization of strength and power with a couple of resistance training movements and compare it to like how much speed a person produces, and then they also want to look at reverse punch speed and jab reverse punch speed from a static position and also from a moving position. So they're doing this more in
it's definitely sport.
In competitive athletes.
Yeah, it's sport karate, not the traditional karate we tend to think of.
Right, but there's some actually really interesting points in this that are definitely applicable to traditional karateka too.
Absolutely, and I think there's certain ingredients into that technique that's lacking too. So you got to be careful. We can't just clearly translate from one sector to the next. Right.
Well, the thing is like I read over this again, and what they tried to do at the end is they did pull out some principles of the study that people can kind of take home, and those actually do apply based on like the other studies that we had read, and then what we know to be true from our basic training and stuff. So we'll kind of talk about that. As far as the dynamic movement, it's basically what you would expect from a competitive athlete. Is whenever they were testing the from a dynamic starting position, basically what they were saying is they want to know if you are faster initiating a reverse punch or a kizami-zuki, gyaku-zuki from a static position or from a moving position. So that's basically bouncing in place. Yeah. They didn't do the forward and back or any kind of like excessive stuff. I guess it was just bouncing in one spot. Right. And then at some point they would decide to move in, and I think that was left up to the athlete. So they did their bench press and back squat test on a Smith machine, which is what's usually they use for standardization just because it controls the path of the movement. Not always the best to train with those, but that's what they were using for strength tests.
Smith machine is a squat rack with basically rails where the bar goes up and down. There's those uniform. Right.
Not a lot of people have access to them because you can't like move them around and stuff. They have to be stationary. Yeah. But yeah, it's like a barbell with rails. And what was the other thing? Oh, and they were trying to perform their lifts with maximal speed. So they were actually trying to see how much, basically how much speed can they produce when doing the exercise.
Yeah, under load.
Under a slight load. And then they said that, the other test was, so that was one test. The other test was doing the gyaku-zuki and the kizami-zuki gyaku-zuki. And the way that they tested it was they actually used a high-speed camera. So rather than like having markers and stuff, which would have been probably way more complicated, they just had a high-speed camera set up. And I think the from what I had read, the way that they initiated the measurement was when, let's see, let me make sure I got this right. So at the time that the back foot? At the time that one of the feet moved, I think it was the front foot, until the time the back foot hit down. So from the time the front foot moved forward until the time the back foot touched down, I think was how they were measuring the time. So they were actually going off the feet. Okay, so that's the thing, is they were, so it says toe off to heel contact on the karate mat were identified in the instance of time, foot movement onset and offset respectively. Punch movement onset and offset were identified in the first frame on the video when the punch started to move toward the target, and punch contact with the target. So basically, from the image that's here, I think they were actually moving forward. So this is why it's
like a Yoriashi gyaku-zuki.
Basically, they didn't say that, but because they were in working with competitive athletes, I think that was kind of the implication. Is they're starting from a stationary position and then sliding forward, or they're bouncing and then sliding forward. Right. Do wish that they would have clarified that, but I had to deduce that based on the image that I'm looking at here.
Right, and that's where they finished the gyaku-zuki looking like they're doing a lunge.
Yeah, so that's the image. You probably can't even see this, but the only image in the study is actually a dude starting from like a very athletic position, and then when he slides forward, his back knee is kind of caved down, which is completely opposite to the way that most like traditional non-competitive karateka would do the gyaku-zuki, but I digress. The principle is kind of the same. Right. So they were calculating the velocity of the punch, and let's see. Okay, so what they did for calculating the speed is they were looking at the gyaku-zuki both times. So they actually were looking at the reverse punch speed. Mm-hmm. They wanted to see how fast those punches were from a static position versus a dynamic position. So that was the one that they were actually looking at. Okay. So for one thing, kind of going back to the strength part of the study, they said that lower limbs were always stronger and more powerful than upper limbs. That's obviously right. But they were basically saying that was an indicator of a faster punch was stronger legs. So I'm gonna come back to that in a minute because they actually make another point about that that's related to the ground reaction force studies that we talked about before. So let's see. The combination of kizami-zuki and gyaku-zuki. Okay, this is really interesting. The combination of the two punches was actually faster than gyaku-zuki alone. So the combination of doing both punches made the gyaku-zuki faster versus just doing gyaku-zuki, which is not what I would have expected. I would have expected just focusing on the reverse punch.
Right, but they were saying they're only focused on the timing of the reverse punch. So the kizami-zuki was just a lead. It was a wind up for the reverse punch.
Right, but I still, even with that, I would have thought that wind up would have just made it take longer, even from that initial point into the next one.
But if you don't take the timing, don't check the timing of the punch until the reverse punch starts. It doesn't matter what you do beforehand.
What do you mean?
In the study, you said that they didn't take the timing or count the timing of the punch until the reverse hand started going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So when they do the jab, it's not affecting the timing of the speed at all. So this whole movement is actually creating more power generating things for the reverse punch.
Right.
Even though the combination is slower, and it's like the whole combination.
Right.
The reverse punch in the combination is faster.
Yeah, and they explain why that is, but for me, like, getting that wind-up position, I figured, like, making more distance would have caused them to slow down, because they're having to cover more distance.
Right. But on that stretch cycle, also, you got the opportunity to contract harder, faster.
Right. So that was the point that they made. Let's see here. Where is it? So this was a really, really interesting point. They said... So the combination of kizami-zuki and gyaku-zuki resulted in higher punch speed compared with gyaku-zuki alone. This was the explanation. Because both arms contribute to the execution of this combination in attacking techniques, it is conceivable that the execution of the first punch, the kizami-zuki, may be associated with a rotation on the trunk in an direction opposite to the limb performing kizami-zuki, which occurs immediately before the execution of the gyaku-zuki with the contralateral limb. The rotation of the trunk may in turn favor the stretch shortening contraction of trunk muscles, contributing to the higher punching speed in the combination of kizami-zuki and gyaku-zuki compared with gyaku-zuki alone. So like you said, stretch shortening cycle. You're opening that up, and then basically your muscles are contracting in. So let's kind of talk about that.
Full range.
Right. So
full range contraction instead of like half range.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So there's more and more use of this kind of terminology, I think, in the martial arts world in general, where, people are doing their best and they're trying to bring in scientific principles, but sometimes, like, it's hard to see it in the right context. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like, we're not really experts on this, but we know a little bit.
Right.
So this is an example where, stretch shortening cycle totally makes sense. Like, you're literally opening up the body. You're actually, like, stretching out the musculature and the connective tissue that would be snapping back into place in order to drive that reverse punch. So that was my elbow hitting the...
Yeah, it hurt.
No, I'm good. I had worse. Okay, I'm strong girl. Strong karate person.
Yes.
I think sometimes... too often, and this has been said by others, and I'm just parroting what I've heard. Sometimes people try to make that happen.
Yeah, because I agree with you that they try to put the template on the wrong pitcher in a sense.
Right. So, a couple of examples, and this is just
shortened cycle
of people trying to implement that.
Yeah.
We've been to seminars where they're literally teaching complete the step and then punch afterwards, because they think that somehow that step into the punch is going to, like, have that elastic type movement.
Right.
The body's connected, but not quite that much.
Right.
We've seen...
There's principles to it. It's just not that principle.
Right. It's not timed correctly.
For the stretch...
For that to work.
Yeah,
right.
You got to make sure that's understood, because
right,
there are things about the step punch thing that does work.
Yeah, there are ways to perform it that can make it work.
Right, but we're talking about that particular understanding is incorrect.
Right.
Okay.
There are others that will kind of compress that, and they'll use a little bit more of their trunk into it and try to, like, almost, like, do this...
Basically throw up themselves.
Kind of, yeah. This regurgitating upper body movement. And they'll try to, like, throw the punch on top of it.
Yeah.
And, like, here's the other thing. I think when you try to force a shape because you're conceptualizing it a certain way, you're kind of missing what is happening physiologically.
Okay.
So even though, like, that like, body wave type thing, like, that can physically happen, but not from you actively trying to do it with your body, basically. And there's a couple of different instances. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I might disagree with you.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, in order for that elastic type movement to work, if my understanding is correct, is you would have to continue to have some kind of engagement in your core in order for that, like, step and then punch thing to maybe work. And that is taking out the principle of ground reaction force a little bit because you're not quite timing that the same. Right. It would depend on how you're timing that. Now you could time a step-in punch where you're still like driving with your back leg, you're getting your body in front of that back leg to drive that punch forward, and then you're still allowing a little bit of movement in that upper body. Right. I'm not so sure of how much of an impact that would have. We probably have to see some kind of research to know what that would look like. Okay. But I feel like when you actively try to make that, as opposed to just like letting your body do it naturally, I feel like you're actually taking away from the technique. Right, you follow what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. Okay. And at a certain level, I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, for us peons who aren't Steve Ubel, I think it completely applies. But I will say this. Right. I've never been hit harder by Steve, except for the time he said, I could show you creating power generation in the air by doing that. And what he did is he literally went back, came up, and then did like a crunch cycle, but he went straight, like a diagonal down. Yeah. And it was like, boom.
So kind of like an open and closed type thing?
Yeah, but instead of being this way, his impact was coming this way. Like, he maneuvered his body in such a way that his shoulders and his fists were still in line, but they were at a diagonal.
For people who are just listening, this way is like up and then down in a diagonal.
I'm trying to explain it. The question that was presented to him was, can you make kime in the air? Right. And can you make good kime? Right. You know, because people were thinking, jump kime, you know. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, he asked me to step over, and he looked at me, and he does his traditional warning, like, I'm about to hit you hard. He goes, he looks at me under his breath, he goes, brace yourself. I said, okay. And he went, and boom, and he hit me like dead in the chest. And I swear to you, he hit so hard that it collapsed my stance. I don't know how to explain it. Like, my knees and I just buckled down. And I've never been hit harder by him or anybody else. Right. But it was an obvious, like, from my perspective, it coming in, it was the obvious, and then that whole like regurgitation kind of crunch.
Yeah, that open and closed.
Yeah, but it was definitely through the spine and not through like the chest area. And oh my gosh. Right. Now, I don't know if he was using that principle. Right. I don't know if he was.
I think he was. I guess maybe. So you his know, is like time. I don't know. I guess maybe what I'm trying to say is like, his timing is so good with like when he opens and when he closes and how far he's actually moving his torso. So he's actually said that even like with rotation, so we're talking about flexion extension of the spine, going back to rotation, you know, he has said that there's a time that you can uncouple your shoulders and your hips, and you can make that stretch shortening type of thing work. But if it gets too far out of alignment, then you're missing the point. Sorry, the dog is like wanting pets. If you get too far out of alignment, like of your overlap, then you're gonna lose it. You know, it's like you have to think of.
Well, I want to say this. That principle, that shortening cycle, that whole idea of the whip kind of thing is a high level idea.
Oh yeah.
If definitely. You don't have basic mastery of basic, body movements, principles, you're never going to get it. Right. You're never going to get it. So if you can't time your hip and your hand when hitting the makiwara, you will never be able to make that work. Disassemble that timing and adjust it or customize it to make more power.
I know I can't do it.
So the creation of power has to be baselined on the idea that you can coordinate yourself properly. Right.
So you have to have a standard. This is why we have standardization in karate. You have a target that you're shooting for first. Right. You get that correct. You get things coordinated, and then you can start to deviate from that. But that's why we do principle-based teaching. You start with that principle, and even though, like, I get people want to get away from dogma, and they don't want to feel like everybody is the same. I understand, like, trying to get away from jerk teachers who make everyone do the same things, but teaching a principle, everybody might not end up looking the same, but as long as those ideas are still there, this is where you start from, through your Q ranks and through your early Dan ranks, and then you can start to branch out, and you can start, adding in your waves and your uncoupling of hips and shoulders. And
I believe it's because it's not only ineffective if you do it timed incorrectly, but it's dangerous to your body.
Right.
It will tear you apart if you're timing it wrong and make an impact. So, these things that people talk about as if they're something you should know by Nidan or Sandan is ridiculous to me. You know what I mean? It's like...
Well, to kind of talk about that in like a slightly different perspective, like the whole wave thing or the like stretch shortening idea. Think about like an Olympic lifter. If you know what a clean and jerk looks like, or even just a power clean, they do have a little bit of that like wave-like motion, but it's not a lot. The one thing about doing a power clean, especially a power clean or a power snatch, is your spine has to be snatch. Your spine has to be completely rigid.
I smiled at the camera and I thought that was funny. I'm sorry.
Okay. Your spine has to be basically rigid, and your extremities have to be super lax. So you're trying to not get a lot of motion out of your spine. You're actually trying to keep it pretty rigid. That's not to say you're not going to have some movement, but that's kind of the goal. And yet you're still making that wave-like movement. So you're taking a rigid spine and making a wave like on the outside, but you're not doing that with you're not doing the worm.
It's it's the reaction to the action. The reaction is the spine wave. The action is what people can't see. It's the thing that makes you do that. Right? And everybody goes like you think, and what you were saying was they think it's a soft, like flexible thing. And it's not that at all. It's a very constricted, very engaged muscular movement that's very small. But the small movement at the right place makes the rest of the body do what it does.
The other thing you have to think about is, like you mentioned with Kime, is essentially, like on a physiological level, Kime is muscular contraction just over a really short period of time. There's obviously a lot more to that I'm sure even we don't understand, but that's the basics of it. So if you have to be able to contract your muscles, if they're overstretched, it's okay. So the way that the muscles work is there's actually there's like fibers that cross over each other, and they have this whole mechanism where they literally walk over each other in order to contract. And then and there's this optimal overlap where those muscle fibers have to start from in order to have great tensile and contraction strength. So if they're stretched out too much, and you've literally stretched out that overlap, then it's going to be even harder for you to be able to get into that tensed position, regardless of how long you're trying to be in that tense position.
Even if the difficulty didn't raise that high, it takes longer.
Yeah, it takes longer.
It's going to take longer.
Yeah. So you're basically you're overstretching, whether you're rotating or you're doing this up and down thing. You're overdoing it, and then you're having to get back into optimal position and then contract from there. Like, you're really overdoing yourself. Now, that's not even getting into what you're doing to your connective tissue, because it doesn't contract like that. When you contract your muscles, it pulls on the connective tissue, but there's some elasticity there as well, and you're pulling on that, and you're trying to use that. But remember, tendons are very thick and very
rigid. They're
pretty rigid. They're not made to do that kind of thing. That's the reason people get plantar fasciitis, is like that's where you have like basically tendon damage on the bottom of your foot, because that tendon sheath goes underneath and supports the arch of the foot. If you overwork that tendon sheath because you've been doing too much elastic movement, like banging on the ground or walking or whatever, it causes damage. It's not made to do that much. So, you could do that in other areas of your body too. So those are just some ideas to remember when you're trying to implement this kind of stuff.
I would say this though, for those guys that teach the overstretch and kind of like a wind up kind of thing, I would encourage the students to see it the way they do it and not the way they describe it. Because if you watch the guys, they're not forcing themselves in this huge stretchy looking kind of shape. They actually are relaxing into that shape. So there's no tension there. They're just moving it to where your body naturally subtly stretches your muscles. It's a very subtle thing. But they're trying to describe it in a very exaggerated way so you understand what they're trying to get at. But so what I would encourage is that if you listen or train with guys like that, remember, maybe just try to relax into the shape first before you try to go the other way, because maybe that's all you need.
Well, it should be natural, basically. I guess like a natural pullback. But okay, so
that goes back to the same overlapping idea.
So right. So when you're doing this stretch shortening thing, you can't just like stretch out and then go from there. No. It has to start from a starting position. You pull back kind of like a slingshot, and then you let go, but you can't pull back too far, basically.
It's a slingshot with a broken rubber band. Basically.
Yeah, old rubber band.
Old rubber band stretches too far, you're going to break.
Right. Okay, so let's see here. Look back into this study doodad. Okay, so let's see.
By the way, though, if it's done by the Italian Karate Federation, I think that's what they're called. I mean, Italy's had a high standard of karateka for a long time. Mm-hmm. They've had multiple world champions, even through like the JKA days and stuff. They were a formidable group.
Right.
And nowadays with the WKF stuff, they still are very formidable. Majority of your top two female, well, I might be mistaken because I haven't watched them in a couple of years, but I believe your top female kata practitioner is from Italy. Mm. I believe no, the other one's from Spain. But and then your top kata team is from Italy. And they put a lot of time into that stuff. I mean, it's not like these... I think there's certain countries in the world that put a legitimate effort in scientifically improving their sports and athletics, and I think Italy within karate has done that historically.
Yeah.
Throughout the ages, and that's why if you look at your Italian players, they got good standard, like really good standard.
Right.
Overall kihon, kata, and kumite. So.
Right. So, saying all that, kind of wrapping up that section, we're not saying stretch shorting cycles bad. Don't do kizami-zuki, gyaku-zuki to have faster reverse punch. We're not saying that.
No, we're just
saying that sometimes that principle is taken out of context.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's exaggerated.
Yes.
To the point where it completely goes the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. To where you're really dysfunctional. So.
Right. So I want to kind of lump this next part together because they all kind of connect to each other. So one thing was they were making the point that punch kinematics are different than boxing kinematics. Now, they were saying that basically, whenever they were comparing the athletes they were using.
Okay.
So they basically said that the biomechanical execution of punching action from a karate athlete is very horizontal, and they were saying that boxers are more vertical. So that they were basically saying that the ground reaction forces used by karateka in reverse punching is actually higher than they would be in a boxer. They were basically making the point that boxers don't really use ground reaction force that much. I'm not sure which studies they were citing for that, because the ones that we looked at were showing that that was the case, that boxers do use it, and I think most boxers would probably have
You're really offended right now.
Well, I mean, they're not saying that boxers don't use the floor at all, but they were saying that karateka use it more, which I would agree with that, because most boxers do have a little bit more of an upper body focus, but I think maybe they use I don't know, just the way they said it made them sound like they don't really use the floor that much, and I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the saying "you punch with your feet" came from boxing.
Right.
That tells you right there.
I think the reason they said that is boxers are standing more upright, and they're using that more up, and they're just not using their knees to extend quite as much as karateka, like literally sliding forward.
But the only difference is the karateka have an exaggerated stance, while a boxer has a very minimal stance.
Right.
But it's still a stance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not going to get up.
Well, I mean,
get all feisty with you.
I know they're just measures, and they're talking about the measuring of upper and lower body strength in a karateka versus a boxer. How much they are literally putting force into the floor. I can see where they could get the numbers that would show that karateka used more of the floor.
Yeah, that's the reason why the research articles on things like this are kind of not as available as much, because they're not easily identified or isolated. Because you can't use other like boxing, for example, to compare to karate. It's not this. It's the same, but not the same.
Right. The mechanics just aren't similar enough.
Not enough, but they look the same,
Yeah.
And that's to me, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Because
that's why you have to look at if you're trying to look at the research, you have to look at lots of different pieces of data. Because sometimes two people can be studying the same exact sport, but they're studying a different group of people, and they're studying the same thing, and they have completely different outcomes. That happens in karate stuff too.
Yeah. So I guess the lesson learned is when you research for your karate and you listen or read scientific research, make sure you have 4 or 5 different research papers.
Maybe more than that. Yeah, it just depends.
To kind of generalize what they're all found.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so this one was also interesting. Let's see here. Where did it go? Okay, so basically one of the other conclusions that they came to, besides the fact that that jab reverse punch created a stronger gyaku-zuki was that punching from a static starting position, was faster than doing it from a dynamic position. Yeah. Which just makes all the traditional karateka go, told you so! But, this is kind of a chicken, is it a chicken or the egg thing? Right. They said previous observations focusing on national and international level karateka showed that successful performance in karate is associated with higher jumping ability in the squat jump, where you literally squat and then jump. Squat and then jump, but not the counter movement jump, which is where you land and then jump again, basically. Okay. Supporting the hypothesis that skilled karate athletes rely more on the ability to express high gradients of force when they start from a static condition rather than from a stretch, shortening, contraction. So this is really interesting too, because it's the same principle we just talked about, but it's in the legs and it's the opposite. So they were saying that for some reason karate athletes are not as quick landing and then taking off as they are from a static position and then moving. Which kind of it seems a little bit backwards. It seems like it does seem like there should be, this is why I said, the kizami-zuki, gyaku-zuki, you're covering more distance. If you're opening up with the kizami-zuki, which is what they said they figure happened, you're covering more distance with the reverse punch. So I would think that you would end up going slower, but the actual research is showing that you're not. So then why wouldn't the same thing apply to your legs? You're having to travel more distance because you're squatting down more and then having to extend more to go forward. I don't know if it's a leg strength thing or not.
It could be just a rotational thing.
I don't know. I mean, they're literally talking about landing down and going forward.
Right. Which, dude, to me, I think it's funny that says not really that productive for karate.
It's not fast enough. Yeah, it's not as fast as doing from a static position.
Right, but when you compete, the first thing most of your coaches make you do are box jumps.
Bouncing.
Yeah, they'll make you jump from a box onto the ground and then sprint out.
Right, and that's what a counter movement. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And what they're saying is that's not faster. No. Not for karate athletes anyway, and not according to this study. Now we might find other studies that show something different, but I think I had actually read that before. That for some reason, I don't know if it's because. This is the chicken or the egg thing. It could be that because karate athletes train from a static position so much that we're literally in a zenkuzu-dachi, in a front stance, doing our techniques from a static position, immediately firing off into movement so much throughout our basics that maybe going into that moving position doesn't help. I don't know. I don't know if it's because it's not trained. Here's the thing though, is remember they measured them the same. So the measurement was when those feet took off from the ground. It wasn't from in the air to down, which that would make it even worse. Right. We always got warned when we were coming up in the dojo, don't do that stupid bouncing thing because all somebody has to do is catch your timing and hit you in midair and you're done. What was said. I know.
I'm sorry. That's some hogwash.
I know. You'd have to really, really have good timing to do that.
If you think someone who spars that way has only one type of bounce,
right,
you're an idiot.
Right. They have lots of different ways.
That's the whole idea. Is that's a whole nother option to do different things. Now, some people overdo it. And some people underdo it.
Yeah.
I'll say this about bouncing. I use it just like I would use a reverse punch or a kick. I normally will start out static and in a match and move around. But if that person stays too far away from me, I will start to bounce. And I won't bounce back and forth. I'll just bounce up and down. And I kind of just sit there and bounce a little bit. And then I hide my distance closing with the bounce.
Right.
I'll get closer with him without him really kind of seeing.
Do you think that's what they use it for in general?
No, I think they use it for a crutch. In general, yeah, most people will start bouncing because it's easier to not tell what's going on, not show any tells.
Okay.
You're moving already. You're already moving, so
it's harder to watch for when a person's
what person's coming, right? It's compared to static where you're just boom, you're going.
I can see that. Okay.
I think static fighting, that more planted fighting, is a more developed, more evolved way of fighting because you are not only physically developed, but your neurological system has that sharp pulse compared to a purely athletic bounce, bounce, boom, boom.
Or it's for when you're an old lady and you can't keep up with the college girls, so you can't bounce, so you just hold still and hope to God they wear themselves out. Because that has literally happened to me more than once.
Well, that's a whole other discussion, though, right?
Yeah.
And I think we'd have to research that more because we're just talking about our personal experiences.
Yeah. I just, I would, in general, I would think that if a person was bouncing, from the time they make the decision to go forward, like, it seems like overall it would take a little bit longer to land and then take off. But then again, it seems like they would move faster because you've got that, like, that plyometric type movement. This is an actual plyometric, where you're literally getting in a stretched position and then moving immediately out of it. You would think that it would be faster. It's really shocking to me that they didn't see that.
Right. Because it has that whole coordination thing.
You think that's why?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people, when they do the bounce, they'll go flat-footed before they drive forward.
So you think they're not coordinating. Maybe the whole thing is not that the movement was faster, is that they weren't coordinating their arms correctly. Is that what you mean?
Whole body coordination.
Yeah.
Move in unison. It's it's harder to have a body coordination when you're moving.
Yeah.
Compared to just being static and boom.
Yeah.
So, because being static, to me, you're starting at ground zero. Mm-hmm. When you're bouncing, you're starting at -5.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a little bit behind a little bit.
Yeah, and
strategically,
kind of
there's
bounce,
we're talking about physical movement.
Right.
You're behind the ball.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
to me, that's that. But, I'm sure we'll have people tell us that we're wrong.
That hasn't happened yet. Anyway.
We got friends. That's all.
But I might have to look into. I think I have another study about counter movement, jumping, and
So the question now is, have we covered the speed of the punch and which one's faster, dynamic or static?
Yeah, that's what I said initially. Yeah. Is that from a static position? So the fastest punches were from a static position, kizami-zuki, gyaku-zuki.
Yeah.
That was literally the fastest gyaku-zuki was from that position. Is basically what they were saying.
Right. So
in general, kizami-zuki, gyaku-zuki was faster.
So a nerve impulse is what creates the movement or the contraction of a muscle. Is the nerve saying, "Hey, you got to do that," right?
Right.
So, I think it's amazing, and I think you hit it on the nail when you said we practice it, from static position so much from day one that those patterns have a very strong nerve impulse compared to dancing around and going, "Oh, I want to do this now."
Yeah. Because
then I think your mind subconsciously goes, "Oh, I gotta get to this point before I can drive forward," kind of thing. Yeah. You have to settle to a certain shape. Right. Or movement that your body knows, and then they go from there.
Well, it could be the same thing we talked about earlier, like that optimal overlap thing. Like, I know for me, and it could be psychological, if I bounce, when I land to take off, like, it takes all the concentration that I have to fire those muscles and go forward. Now, I'm not trained that way, so I'm not used to that. But it just seems like when you're still, or more still, it's just easier to just, like, fire and go. Once again, could be a training thing, but I don't know. I don't know if I train the other way if it would be any different.
I agree with you because definitely the bouncing and moving thing was something I had to train a lot to get.
Sorry, the dog is thirsty, so that's what that sound is.
Man, I'm gonna hang that dog by her. I'm gonna hang her tonight. She has been such
Hang her with love. She just wants pets all the time.
Get.
Anyhow, so there's that. There's how to make your punch faster. Just always do 2 punches, basically. From a static position.
No.
Sliding forward and let your back knee collapse.
No. Oh, God,
don't do any of that.
God, please, no.
Or if you're in front of us, bounce and then just do gyaku-zuki. Because that's the slowest punch. And then we'll know what's coming. Yeah.
No, hopefully you took from this that there's principles that can be applied. But they have to be in the proper or correct situation for them to be the optimal choice. Yeah. The problem, I think, a lot of times that we get to this level of all these principles and these upper levels, we forget that the more fine-tuned you are, the less broad the technique has, like the less universal use, in a sense.
More fine-tuned you are in what way?
Okay, so let's say we're talking about the regurgitation kind of thing with your torso. Right. That doesn't work if I'm standing right in front of you and I just start to regurgitate and try to hit you.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
you understand?
Yeah,
but if I'm engaged with you and I'm punching and all of a sudden there's something I have to do and I just go boom and I use my muscles and I do that and I have a great impact. yeah, it works in that situation, but it wouldn't work in a general situation.
Exactly.
I think we miss the point when we get more advanced that these are no longer universal general application stuff. There are certain times where the basic rotation and creation of power is enough. And sometimes the situation calls for something more.
Right. Well, that's why we have principle-based teaching.
Yes.
And learning.
Yes. But even then, people forget how, when you get closer to the top, how much narrower it is. And, your basics, your fundamentals has this broad spectrum, right? Your fundamental stance can be applied in any situation, generally any time, and have effectiveness, right?
Yeah.
The length and shorten cycle, that stretch shorten cycle, it's not going to be used in any situation. It's going to be used in a very specific and very very specific situation,
right?
That where it would be optimal,
right?
Impact, so optimal, effectiveness.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of looking at it like inverted. Like, you learn like a couple of basic principles, and they can be applied in all kinds of ways. And one of those ways might be, using that stretch shortening cycle, but that only applies to like this little situation over here. But they all kind of come back to that same principle. Like, there's different ways of
describing that, just like you did. It's kind of, I just said
I know,
that,
but you said it was.
said that,
but you said it was a pyramid up, and I'm like, no, it's an upside down pyramid. It's like
no,
this.
dude, don't.
Whatever, we're saying the same thing. Doesn't matter.
We are saying the same thing, and basically,
it's just shapes.
You learn your basic principles because all those principles are basic ingredients to all the more advanced stuff. Like we said earlier, if you can't do a basic, reverse punch timed correctly, then why would you do any of these other things? Because that has to be happening before you can do anything else. Yeah. So to me, it's a pyramid, not an upside down triangle.
It's an upside down pyramid. Fine, whatever.
Either way, we could all be wrong. Whatever.
We can't all be right, dear.
I could be right.
Okay. Anything else to add?
What you working on?
What am I working on? Oh, I didn't work Conquer Show last week, so kind of the same stuff. Did I work it last week? Nope. Maybe I did. I don't remember. Oh yeah, I did. On Tuesday I did. It was Tuesday. Yep. Worked on. You quit that. Quit slurping at me.
Ain't none of my business though.
What was the? I can't remember. I'm like working on like the whole thing now. I'm trying to work on putting it together and not like screwing everything up. Like working on, especially that beginning with the oizuki and the retraction thing, not overdoing it, and working on like the ending with the jump and not coming up too high for like the basic kata. So kind of that kind of stuff. Nothing really new, I guess.
Well, that's a big part of the kata is putting it all together. Yeah.
And then the turning into the inside blocks, that was giving me some trouble, like not driving enough into the technique. So working on that part as well. Okay. What are you working on?
Well, side snap kick is part of it, but it's relaxing the kicking leg more. I can do it in my front kicks, but my side snap, side thrust, and my roundhouses tend to be stiffer. I've just been relaxing. Did a lot of work on the bag in Makiwara recently, so being able to kick the bag.
Oh, you mean fixing it?
Yeah, fixing it. So
yeah.
Being able to kick the bag at whatever speed, whatever impact I want to do is really nice. So been working on that. And application of the one, two, third, fourth, fifth move of Wonka.
Okay.
And just kind of going through that. I'm very grateful that we have people that can. What is willing to point us in a direction that seems to be realistic. Yeah.
Righto.
Because
it sucks to flounder.
It does suck to flounder, and then when you think you got something good, and someone can point out the flaw,
all the things that are wrong.
The flaw within
everything's wrong.
Like the move and a half in, not even a second move in.
You breathed wrong. Start over.
Sorry, your hand is in the wrong position. He'll elbow you. What? Oh. So things like that. It's just encouraging to know that when you do have ideas that you're either going the right direction or wrong direction, you know,
right.
and it hurts because when you're in the wrong direction, your ego gets stomped on a little bit, you know.
That's part of the journey.
Yeah, and I think the longer you train, and I know that sounds so hokey, but the more having the beginner's mind is so important.
Yeah.
So important, because if you feel like you already have something and it's wrong, it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
But if you think, I'm just trying this, and you know, it might be right, it might be wrong, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's so much easier.
Yeah.
But, you know.
So much easier if you doubt yourself.
Well.
That's what he's saying.
I'm
kidding.
It's so much easier if you're naive about what you're doing.
Yeah, or if you just are just like, I'm going to do it. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Fix it, change it, whatever.
Yeah. Everybody has ego.
Yeah. You can't get around that.
You can't get around it. Everybody has it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're passionate about what you do, you're going to always have ego involved.
Yeah.
Your pride, anything, it's going to be there. So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that, to know that I'm not going to spend the rest of my life on an idea that's completely inaccurate or completely ineffective. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hate the fact that most of the world believes karate is ineffective.
I hate that too. It's embarrassing, actually, to know that.
Yeah. And it's embarrassing because we lost the way.
Yeah.
Somewhere in our generations, we lost it. And it's our fault. So.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that when some of these guys come to our dojo and they think that our karate is ineffective, a simple down block demonstration is all that's needed. Mm-hmm. Because if you could do a down block, you have 5 or 6 applications right there. Easily.
But is it a guard?
Is it a guard? What? I am still dumbfounded by that question. Still dumbfounded.
That was like a year ago now, you know?
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, is that a guard? I don't even think jiu-jitsu practitioners ask that stupid question.
Do they call it that?
I don't think so. I don't think they refer to it that way.
If you're a jiu-jitsu person watching this, will you let us know if you call any of your positions guards?
Well, I understand there's names for them, like you got sideline position and guards like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think...
Is that a guard?
Yeah, I don't think he used that word correctly, and it threw me for a loop. Sure.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
I don't think it means what you think it means. Alright.
Alrighty, y'all. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully some of this made sense. Hopefully I did not butcher all of that if you're a more sciencey person than I am. Just trying to get some more in-depth information and see if we can apply it to what we do.
I hope my layman's translation skills were good enough to kind of put it into everyday words.
Skills, boy. See y'all next time.
Bye. Have a good
week.